I think we can go ahead and kick off then. Um, okay, great. Welcome everyone to the July 17th instance of the SIG Documentation Community Meeting. We don't have any agenda items today, so if people have topics they want to bring up, we can cover that, and we can also, like Jenny was mentioning, look at previous agenda items and some of the action items we have from those and check on status with that. I guess one item we can discuss because I'm curious what people think. But it's July now. We have a few months, like 3 to 4, until KubeCon and WasmCon, and I was just wondering if there's anything that we should have be goals for those. Like I personally am used to conferences driving goals, and so do we have some sort of state that we want documentation to be in that in the past, we've talked about bytecodealliance.org pointing to docs. We've talked about updating WASI.dev to include phase 1 and phase 2 proposals. Do we see KubeCon as a good deadline for things like that? Are there other things that we want to add to the list?
I was talking to Taylor recently. This actually might make David, we were talking about the community SIG at the beginning. I don't know if this is like part of their jurisdiction or but what is I'm guessing that there will be something similar to what happened at the last WasmCon with like BA or like I guess I've also like talked to various people about it being like an opportunity for some kind of like hackathon where like people get in a room and try and make things with components. So I don't know if like anybody's like started uh formally like trying to organize that or not, but I guess that would like probably impact what would need to be done from a docs perspective if or what our docs goals would be.
Yeah, this was a topic at yesterday's SIG community meeting too. And I think it was partially hearkening back to WasmCon last year,
Mhm.
and talking about what we did and what the alliance did and how that worked out. And then partially talking about how circumstances are different this year, having WasmCon simultaneously or co-located and co-weeked with KubeCon, so that WasmCon I think is Monday, Tuesday, and then you roll right over into KubeCon Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's sort of last year for WasmCon, we had an empty day the Friday after WasmCon, and that's when we held our hackathon, BACon. And so that was a good opportunity to do that. I think it's less clear what kinds of things we might orchestrate this year, given that WasmCon is a Monday, Tuesday, and then people probably would be planning to also carry forward and go to the KubeCon Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so I think it's a topic that we've talked about. It's like, okay, what options, what would make sense? Does it make sense to try and hold an all-day hackathon event like we did last time, or not? So there are conversations starting to happen. I know that the revised call for papers for WasmCon closed yesterday, and so there were 69 additional submissions that are being reviewed now by the program committee, and probably some updates to existing papers that were already reviewed. And so there's another couple of weeks of that process before the schedule gets announced. But Bytecode Alliance, again, will be a co-sponsor, community co-sponsor for WasmCon. And we'll have an opportunity both, I think, to contribute to the content at the conference itself. We'll be on site, I'm assuming easily enough, as a sponsor participant like we were last time with a booth. And we'll have access to meeting space and other stuff during the event. And then up to us, I guess, if we want to organize something around it. So I think Kate's question about would there be some interesting milestones we could try and aim for or hit to be able to either do or distribute or call attention to at WasmCon from a documentation perspective? It sounds like a great thing. We could probably make a list. And then I think community and the TSC, SIG community and the TSC are noodling over what kind of hands-on gathering might make sense given the timing. Where are we with respect to a .3 release? What else is going on, et cetera. So it's an open discussion that's happening now, and I think it would be great to have this group plugged into that. I've missed the last few meetings here, though, so I'm not sure specifically what things have been more front and center with respect to evolving the documentation. Kate's suggestion or mention of more content on the website, definitely something we could do anytime. So.
Yeah, and that's something we've been talking about for a while. So I think finding a way to prioritize that. I'm
I can
happy to.
easily get content on the site. I'm not the person to create it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think we were with that one. The question was where should it fit in the existing scaffolding, with the understanding that there's a lot of, from what I understand, not a lot as much flexibility with re-architecting the site. And so it's figuring out where it fits with the existing structure. But we should just put it somewhere for now. So I can take that on of trying to find a place to put, the two links to wazi.dev and the component model book from the Bytecode Alliance site. And
we do have the ability to make structural modifications to the site. So it's not like you'd have to shoehorn it into someplace in the existing site framework, but some changes would be more involved than others.
Okay.
Adding another tab or another item on the menu bar, et cetera. So don't constrain yourself to like, okay, well, if we snuck something in here, people might find it. I'd say start from what you think maybe makes sense, and then we can figure out. We have complete control of the site. It's not like we depend on a third party to manage it for us. But some changes might turn out to be more involved than others. But I'd say we should start with what you think would be good, and then we can figure it out from there.
Okay, that sounds good. The only other thing that this would probably be aligned with partnering with events on this would be for WasmCon, do we want to like print out like a resource for people? And would that could even just be like QR codes to documentation, or it could be documentation itself. So I don't know if y'all have already talked about that as well within events.
And not specifically, but we do. I mean, we did that last year for WasmCon. We printed a front and back handout, nicely printed color handout about the Bytecode Alliance. It was a lot of reusing content from the website to get it packaged into a complete front back page, and then we had that at the site. We had a QR code that pointed to the hackathon to BACon on site, so make it easy for people to register. So those kinds of things we could definitely do. The flyer that we produced last time was a contributed effort. So I worked with someone with design expertise to format it and make it look nice. But we could definitely, we'd have budget to print, wouldn't want to print like a 300-page book and give it to everybody, but we'd have budget to produce materials that we could hand out or refer to, have a QR code, et cetera. And we'd have the space to present that to people in the booth, our sponsor booth at the conference. So wide open for suggestions like that to try and make it a better experience for people and give us an outlet for documentation and information we want people to have.
Yeah, my follow up to that would be, would we want that sheet to be something that is kind of someone's partner through the conference, in the sense that like Ryan goes on stage and presents something about components, and they want to have kind of a quick definition of what a component is right there in front of them? Or is it something that is more of a resource sheet? Or is it something that's all the above? Or is it just a schedule? Like what do we see it being, and kind of what do we imagine people wanting and needing the most?
Yeah, those those are, I think, more useful suggestions. Last year it was if you're interested in being a member of the Byte Code Alliance, here's what we're all about. So it was about the alliance per se, not any of the things that you just described, Kate. So
Do you have the printout from last year, that resource?
I'm pretty sure I still have a PDF that we used as part of producing it and having it as a backup copy. So I'll hunt that down and send that out, make that available to folks.
This might be something to partner with the event SIG on, because um, they might have a sense of what, what is a good thing for audiences, what captures them more than we might. But we would be able to maybe fill in the content, like what are the learning points that we want people to have in front of them. Um, and that would be another thing to work with, like kind of the WASMCon, I guess, committee on, to know like what are the talks that are going to be presented. So what are the kind of the terms that people might want to carry with them throughout the event.
Yeah, I think my general experience with events is that, organizationally, you'd have maybe a sort of a summary of the top messages that you'd have for the event, what you want to try and facilitate and help for people. And I could imagine putting that together across SIG community and SIG documentation with input from the TSC and others. We're going to be plugged into, I will be probably, to the operational aspects of the conference. And so what you mentioned, visibility into some of those kinds of things, we will definitely have. I will have the schedule, what the setup is going to be, where we'll be located as sponsors, et cetera. So all of those logistical details I will have access to through the WASMCon folks at Linux Foundation. So if we could have a conversation jointly across a couple of this SIG community, TSC, or say, okay, the top 3 things we'd like to accomplish at WASMCon look like the following, then I think we could definitely figure out how to give ourselves those opportunities. We just need to pull the material together and be prepared to either distribute it or present it or host it or whatever was required. But yeah, that'd be great. Also, to point out, we have, the community stream. So we have a monthly community video stream. And so there's perhaps a role that we could play in terms of the editorial calendar for that between now and WASMCon too, as an opportunity to encourage people to attend, get information out, provide material that we would like people to have in advance of the conference or just in an ongoing way. So I'll do a plug for Bailey there, and we can see what we can come up with.
I think I'm just, yeah, wondering like how, or yeah, you were like commenting a bit on the differences between like the scheduling last year and this year, and like whether or not there is like a time and a space for something that is like similar to BA Con to like really happen. But if there is, like, yeah, I guess it might be interesting to hear like what people wanted out of the hackathon last year and whether or not it was achieved, and like what, yeah, and just I'm curious to hear like if there is that like kind of like let's display that it's easy to make things like with components kind of a thing. Like, do we have identified like things that we would like to see people doing with components. And I don't know, and I guess like I don't know what the best way is to like figure out who has thoughts about that. But like yeah, that's kind of something I'd be curious about, because I feel like I heard like there were like a couple things that like BACon was trying to do last year, I think, right? Like there was, yeah, and it was like kind of like breakout sessions and like various people like working on various like things that needed to happen. But like I don't know. I know that like there was like stuff with like a public registry that like was set up that like I think people didn't really even like get around to last year. And yeah, like having people be able to like make components and like share them with each other. Like, are these like kinds of like the goals that we have, or yeah, I'm just not sure like what the goals would be if there even is a day like or a time for the hackathon. But yeah.
Yeah, for BACon last year, it was, I think a lot of it was driven by the fact that it was opportunistically, constructively opportunistically spliced into WASMCon. And so, and it also was a reflection of sort of the timing. So in September, a lot of the component model work and WASI Preview 2 work was well along, but it wasn't done yet. And so it was a good opportunity to get people together and have them cluster in small groups and focus on working on things together. Guest language support for things, tool change their component model. There was a small focus group, and I unfortunately wasn't able to attend. There's a small team that looked at documentation, so it's sort of almost BOF-like in the sense of, okay, we're all kind of here already. We've got this nice space at Microsoft. What would we like? What would small groups of people like to get together and work on? And it was kind of orchestrated that way. That was when I think hackathon was the flavor that the event had from that perspective, rather than an additional conference style or whatever. It was more of an unconference, I think, kind of hackathon than anything else. And again, part of that was because of the opportunity we had. And for this year for WASMCon, the opportunity is going to be different. There's not going to be an empty day the day after. It's going to be the beginning of the week. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to be going on. I don't know that we were lucky because WASMCon was in Seattle and Microsoft graciously provided space for us to have BACon after the day after. And so we'd have to figure out those kinds of logistics. So there's a whole bunch of parameters that are different this year. That said, I think if we decided, we collectively across the TSC and SIGs and everybody else, the community just said, okay, this is a good opportunity. Maybe we don't have an all day thing like we did last time, but maybe we do something else. I think we could still figure out how to do it. We just have to fit it into the context of, in particular, I don't know how many people you could get to come in on early on a Sunday, for example, and do something before WASMCon. That might be a stretch. But we should talk about it. And the other piece is timing. Where are we going to be? This is going to be November, I think the 11th and 12th. So relative to various ongoing project activities, WASI, other things, in that window, what's going to be going on? And that may be, harken more back to Kate's thoughts earlier. It's like, okay, well, we've got several months between now and then. If we think ahead, where do we anticipate things will be, and what might we want to have ready at that point that we could start working on now?
Yeah, I think like the things that we want to have ready, I think we should just I think it'd be nice to do kind of a vetting of our documentation and see what we're missing. Things have changed, language tool chains have changed. I'm not sure we've updated our Go guide, for example, to include like how Go now supports Preview 2 in the tool chain. So I think making sure that leading up to that, we're capturing like the latest improvements in the component model and support changes in the component model, and looking at runtimes as well, like what runtimes are now, how they're evolving. Like I have no clue what's been going on with Whammer. Like maybe we need to check in. Like I know they've talked about moving to the component model. I don't know where they're at with that. And so I think just kind of that's another thing, is trying to capture all of those, put them in issues and resolve issues in both books before.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people talk about examples, more different kinds of examples. There have been conversations about, gentle on-ramps for people that are new to the technology and want to become familiar and involved, or maybe some tool chain related things. So it seems like the possibilities are diverse. Just with looking at the timing and what people would most like to have, um, what makes sense to try and accomplish. But I think a list would be good.
Yeah, and when we've talked about gentle on-ramp in the past, I think we've talked about wanting that to include registry so that you don't have to know how to build a component to run it. So um, having
Yeah, I mean,
that
if somebody was going to
incorporated.
stand up a registry, we've talked about that too. There was, as Danny pointed out, I think there was some prototype work that was done this time last year. But I don't think that's still available. So
Yeah, I mean, regarding registry stuff, I think there's like the GHCR stuff. And I think when I've like talked to, I think that like exactly how like things get put in there is like still, well, I guess like maybe that's like a larger conversation, but like I guess like I don't know if like people who would like be at like a hackathon thing should be given like blind or yeah, like should just like open access to publish things to the GHCR stuff be like given to people. Maybe that like maybe the group is like close enough that that makes sense. So I don't know. But yeah, and then obviously there's WA.dev too. So um yeah.
Yeah, I think if the GHCR registry, like if we have the keys to that, that's more than enough because we're talking about an example where someone's pulling components
Mhm.
so that they're skipping their build steps. So I haven't been plugged into that work to know what state it's at, but I think then it just goes down to the work that you've been working on, Danny, of like, how do we decide what's the name, like the path of the Bytecode Alliance, like um registry images. So like how do we name our examples essentially? Um and I remember there was some discussion on one of your PRs about that, but uh deciding that and then just kind of updating an example so that it can pull the component from there. And then we could have a quick start that you don't have to build anything. You can just run and compose components.
Yeah. Um I think yeah. Well, I guess maybe there's like a tangential thing I was like thinking about bringing up that I like maybe should bring up now, which is I think that like a lot of what Eric's like had was in like last time was like what about other like WASI proposals on like WASI.dev and like should that get updated?
Mhm.
Like with like key value or blob store or like these kinds of things. And I think he was gonna like reach out to Bailey and I know she's like on vacation and so I don't know like where that is, but like tied to that is so I guess there's like whether these things make it on WASI.dev, whether these things make it into GHCR. There's the version bump for the things that are already in WASI.dev, right? Because I think that like the 021 release is supposed to happen like in 2 weeks or so. So and then I guess like the thing is like if you depending on what you would want out of like a hackathon-y thing at WasmCon, like I guess like do we only want WASI proposals in GHCR, or can there be example implementations of things that people can like pull and like perform compositions with? And then like not only that, but do we want to encourage people to like learn about workflows where if they've made a useful component, somebody else can depend on it in the component that they're authoring? And like so like our push flows like also like things that we would like want to encourage people to do. So I know I basically just asked a large number of questions. So sorry about that. But these are all like kinds of the things that I would be like curious about figuring out.
Yeah, I think the phased proposals, like the phase one, phase two, like key value on wazi.dev is something that we've talked about in a few meetings, and I'd love to see that on wazi.dev. And I can't imagine we'd be super opposed to doing that. Like we're going to state that they're not approved, they're in a phasal process, and it's also a way of saying come provide your opinion. We need more opinions. So getting that on WASI.dev seems like a priority. And yeah, I know Eric's talked about trying to make that happen. The I guess the hackathon, we really don't even know if that's happening. So what we need for that is kind of hard to figure out. But a registry push story would be nice. For the component book, I wasn't thinking about those getting more WASI proposals up there, like phase one and phase two. I was thinking about getting an example component. Doesn't need to be WASI. So this would be very much for us as the Bytecode Alliance documentation SIG, something that they would push up to that registry. That would be a good quick start component with some quick start with and maybe it would be two components so that you could compose them. But something that's like very tailored to what we need for a quick start, not usable or really like anything something someone would use outside of that scenario.
I mean, I can see how it'd be valuable to have a collection of ideas that all represent good things that could be worked on or done in that window. Maybe not necessarily inherently tied to WasmCon or some event managed around WasmCon. There'll be other things going on. There's been talk about another plumber summit in that time window, for example. So there'll be a number of opportunities for things to get delivered or made available to people. And so I think figuring out a roadmap of things that logically make sense, kind of thinking about the last 4 or 5 months of the calendar year between now and then, would be good. And then as those things kind of crystallized in people's minds, we could figure out what were the ways to bring them out. Is there something that would then lead to that WasmCon would represent an advantage or be beneficial to engage around, or other things. So I think we'll have a number of opportunities, and so whatever collectively makes good sense, it feels like a good thing to work on. We could figure out and get that work started, and then we could figure out where it goes or how many different places it can go. Sounds like you all have lots of good ideas. It's just like which ones in which order and how do they manifest themselves?
The other thing too that I'm like if GHCR was where we had things for the examples. I guess, yeah, I think most recently Taylor Thomas has actually been doing like most of the contributions into like the WASM package tools. But like I guess there are certain flows that are like possible with WAC that are like only possible with Warg today. I don't think this is like I know this is like a little bit like in the details, but I think it makes sense to bring up that like WAC or like basically anything that is registry aware like will need to be updated to use WASM package tools. And there's a registry call later today, so I can like check in on like how close WASM package tools is to like being able to be consumed, but like or by those like various tools. But if we wanted, the book to advise people on how to get things from GHCR. All of the tools are only Warg aware today and not like generally like both OCI and Warg yet. So yeah, I'll check in on the status of that, but that would probably like impact how, what you would even like the content that could make up the examples. So yeah.
Yeah, I think because we're talking about component book, we should really capture all this in an issue we're tracking. So would you be willing to lay out that issue, Danny, or I can? Like if I laid it out, I would just say like, let's have a quick start where we're pulling components from a registry and then I guess tag people in registry to say like what are the criteria we need. And then you could fill in like we need it to be OCI aware, not just work aware and stuff like that. Or if you want to fill out that issue, that's possible too. But I think it'll be easier if we can just go back to specific issues to like and have people who are contributing to those projects just update the status there.
Yeah, let me talk to Lan a bit about like what it would look like to get examples in GHCR. Because I think like right now, literally the only thing in GHCR is the WASI 020 proposals, right? So like the actual like And I think that like he just like manually puts them there. Right. So like how does anybody else put anything else there, and how like you know, challenging should it be to get things in there? But like if we want that to be a place for there to be examples for people to like go build things in the component model book, then like yeah, let me make sure that he like, or yeah, I'll talk to him and then decide what should make it into an issue after talking to him, I think. But yeah. And then yeah, I guess I don't know if there will need to be any like back to the WASI.dev, like yeah, so there's the like, you know, earlier phase proposals, but then like I don't know if there needs to be any like planning for the 021 stuff, and like if we yeah, like to make sure that that gets like updated as possible, and if there should be like information about the 020 and 021 on WASI.dev, might be another thing to think about too.
Yeah, I think we should keep the history. We can create an issue for that. I'll put that up. Any other topics, or we could end a little early if needed?
I think just one thing I'll take away as an action item from this conversation, which is a good one, thank you, is to try and connect some of the dots. It seems like this same conversation or a variant of this conversation is happening in many, if not all, of the SIGs as well as in the TSC. And so I think making sure we communicate across to try and further that discussion and help inform each other is a good thing. So I will work on that.
Which part of the conversation?
Well, what we were talking about with, the activities for the end of the year and planning and outlets for things. And, there's like what's going on the events team and what are we going to, so I think there's just general awareness across some of what the SIGs are working on and what the TSC has been talking about with another plumber summit that I think would be good to just make sure folks are generally sort of aware of here and other places. And so I think there's just we've got good conversations happening in parallel. We need to connect them across somehow. So I will work on that with the TSC, for example. So
Is the events team the community SIG?
yeah, they're SIG community technically, but because there will be things that they will work on. This is a part of what they're sorting out now that aren't literally just events based. We have an events calendar for that we want to transfer to them, but there are other things that they're looking at working on, helping support the monthly community stream, etc. So events and community are the same thing in this context. So
Okay, well, I think we can end a little early. I took some notes. Did anyone else happen to be doing that as well? Okay, I'll upload the notes, and Danny, I can take on uploading the video too today. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and see everyone in a couple weeks. Bye, everyone.